Prepare to embark on an exciting journey as we explore the hidden gems behind Kingville, North Carolina. This documentary trails the adventures of Dion Brooks, a history enthusiast, and his sharp-witted daughter, Michaela, a Dean's Listed senior at UNC Charlotte majoring in history and religion. Brace yourself as we unravel captivating stories and an incredible experience, uncovering the mysteries of the old schoolhouse, the first black school in Albemarle, North Carolina, which had been lost in time until recently rediscovered. We delve deep into Kingville's history as we're reminded of the significant battles fought for education, religion, and land ownership during the times of emancipation and civil rights. Follow us as we explore the mystery behind his story and my story of Kingville and the old schoolhouse.
Where is Kingville?
Start your journey on the East Coast in the charming southern state of North Carolina. Your first destination is Albemarle Road, located on the northeastern side of Charlotte, North Carolina. Take a deep breath and drive at the speed limit for about 35 to 45 minutes, and you'll soon arrive in the secretly historic community of Kingville on the south side of Albemarle, North Carolina.
What is Kingville?
Well, according to Wikipedia, Kingville is an unincorporated community nestled in the southern district of Albemarle, North Carolina, within Stanley County.
When is Kingville?
Stanley County, North Carolina, was established in 1841. Albemarle of Stanley County, North Carolina, was established in 1857. Now, the Emancipation Proclamation was signed in 1863. And then the 14th Amendment came along and granted equal rights to citizenship and education in 1865. The first school built in Stanley County was in 1875. However, it was for whites only. In 1887, Dr. Ogden Doremus King Sr. moved to Albemarle, North Carolina.
Who is Dr. Ogden Doremus King Sr.?
Dr. Ogden Doremus King Sr. was a doctor, humanitarian, and philanthropist who left the bright lights of Brooklyn, New York in 1887 to set up a medical practice in Albemarle, North Carolina. And he wasn't just any ordinary doctor. Dr. King was passionate about empowering black folks through land ownership, religion, and education. He put his heart and soul into his work, and it didn't go unnoticed. In fact, the residents of South Albemarle were so grateful for his generosity that they named the unincorporated community Kingville in his honor back in 1898. 2023 marks the 125th anniversary of the establishment of Kingville as a community. And what better way to celebrate than to take a stroll down memory lane? Take a look at the historic map of Kingville spanning from 1898 through 1967. Once upon a time, Kingville was a self sustaining community, complete with its own doctor, gas station, grocery store, schools, library, churches, parks, beauty salons, barbershops, a laundromat, a Mason Lodge, and a sportsman club. Essentially, it was an economically independent entity, separate from the city of Albemarle.
Since the 1865 Equal Rights to an Education, where did blacks and whites attend school in Albemarle, North Carolina?
A second school was built in 1900, again for whites only, after the first one was burned down. In 1901, Dr. Ogden King Sr. championed Freeman's Chapel, a place built specifically for the black community. This special spot served as a foundation for the very first Kingville school. The consolidation of Kingville and Freeman's Chapel colored schools was announced in Stanley Enterprise newspaper on October 8, 1901. According to that report, the schools will merge, with classes being conducted at the Freeman's Chapel location. In 1904, Thos Henry Brooks served as trustee for Albemarle Normal Industrial School for blacks, and it was located in Mount Zion Church.
In 1907, who was on the deed and board of trustees for the Stanley County Colored Normal and Collegiate Institute?
In 1907, five unsung heroes, Thos Henry Brooks, Richard Wall, Joe Wall Jr., Sandy Burns, and Sandy Tyson, teamed up to become the board of trustees for the Stanley County Colored Normal and Collegiate Institute. These legends set their sights high and landed an astonishing 2,400 square feet of land at the junction of Lundick Street and Washington Lane in Kingville.
How do you know?
Here's the deed from 1907 from the Stanley County Colored Normal and Collegiate Institute Board of Trustees.
How do you know where the school was located in 1907?
Let's take a quick trip down memory lane and trace the story of the old schoolhouse at 1073 Lundick Street. It started back in 1907 when the Board of Trustees of the Stanley County Colored Collegiate Institute took ownership of the land. Fast forward to 1938, the Stanley County Board of Education sold that site to B.C. Cranford, leading us to the present day current deed of 2023, with Robert and Carolyn Tucker as grantor and Chris Bennett and Richard McDonald as grantees of the site at 1073 Lundeck Street in the Kingville area of Albemarle, North Carolina, known as the Old Schoolhouse.
Although the land was purchased in 1907, when exactly was the old schoolhouse built?
The physical structure of the Old Schoolhouse was constructed between 1920 and 1921, as reported by Neighborhood.com and the Fisk University study of the Rosenwald schools in Stanley County. According to Fisk University, there was a total budget cost of $3,600, with $100 from the Negroes, $2,500 from the public, and $1,000 from the Rosenwald Fund.
So what happened to the Stanley County Colored Normal and Collegiate Institute from 1907 to 1920?
What a puzzling enigma. See, Albemarle's black education system has a strange gap in its timeline between 1907 and 1920, which appears to be unaccounted for. It's almost like a black hole in the historical record of this period, and it may forever remain a mystery to us. It wasn't until 14 years later, when the Rosenwald Foundation provided funding, that black education in Albemarle was documented once again.
So what happened to Dr. Ogden King Sr. after 1907?
In 1908, Dr. Ogden King Sr. passed away in Albemarle, North Carolina, only a decade after the African American community named their town Kingville in his honor. The good doctor had the reputation of giving away land to black families for free or at a very low cost, especially after he married Elizabeth Hearn, whose family was one of the wealthiest white families in Albemarle at the time. So it's no surprise that his sudden death, just a year after Wall brothers, Brooks, Tyson, and Burns, bought the land for the old schoolhouse, is one mysterious puzzle.
Who is William Henry Wall, and what makes the Wall family such a big deal in Kingville's history?
Here's a photo taken in 1910 at the former Freeman's Chapel, also known as Big Zion Church, also known now as Union Chapel and Zion Church. This pic shows some of Stanley County's early black leaders standing in front of the church, which was their favorite meeting place at the time. The men in the photo in the front, from left to right, are Calvin Threadgill Sr., Henry Bruton, William Henry Wall, George Spencer, A.D. Cross, Sandy Burns, Josephus Wall II, Richard Wall, James Spencer, Jim Hearn, and A.B. Brown. William Henry Wall, a black brick mason and community member in Stanley County, served as an unsung role model during the time of segregation. Although he only completed sixth grade, Wall was educated and innovative, able to read and write, and very comfortable with a typewriter. His family owned a general store and much of the land on Wall Street. Wall's specialty was brick masonry, and many of the homes on Wall Street were constructed by either him or his brothers. In addition to his work in architecture, Wall was active in his community, serving as Master Mason of Stanley Lodge Number 88 of Prince Hall Masons, the first black notary public in the area, and PTA president for Kingville High, among other roles. He was most heavily involved with Union Chapel Church, serving as a delegate for the church at many conventions and as superintendent for church schools for 50 years, trustee for 50 years, class treasurer, class leader, missionary society, and Excelsior Club. Wall encouraged people to own their own homes and to be independent, and he was proud of all his grandchildren's accomplishments. Apart from being the trailblazers who snagged land and set up the roots of inaugural schools and churches, the Wall family's impact on Kingville go beyond its founding as noteworthy contributors to Kingville's history.
We're sitting here with Steve Wall, a descendant of Mr. Henry Wall. If you notice, we're on Wall Street. If you zoom in on that sign right there, we're right on Wall Street.
Yep.
So tell us who Henry Wall was.
Well, Henry Wall, to me, first and foremost, he was my great-grandfather. And from what I've learned, I missed him by 3 years. He died in 1967, and I was born in 70. So I miss being able to be in his presence. But from what I learned through the family and through the community, he, with a lot of other families and men at that time, did a lot of great things to build this community when it was first established. And I guess the reason why this is called Wall Street is for the things that he contributed to the community as far as churches, and he was a mason in the sense of employment. So he was able to build houses and churches and things like that. He did that throughout Albemarle, not just in the South Albemarle community. And he was a leader of different things So he teamed up with a lot of the other young men at that time to really build this community as far as South Albemarle Park and then the Black High School, Kingville. That was all raw land before those were even established. So through that land, it was donated or sold to build the park for the black community.
Take a look at this map of Wall Heights, and you see that this area was once home to both the old schoolhouse from 1907 to 1937 and the new Kingville High School from 1937 to 1967. It's interesting to note that Wall Heights was also the location of the first park ever built for African Americans in Albemarle, as they were excluded from the city's other parks.
Why did William Wall donate part of Wall Heights for a park?
As far as history goes, the facts are that Henry Wall dedicated his land, or he basically donated his land for the first black schools in the Kingville community, including the old schoolhouse and the Kingville High School and the Kingville Park. Right. Why do you think that's so important? As far as being one of the first real estate owners in
Albemarle. I mean, because back in those days, you couldn't go, the black kids or the black people couldn't go anywhere else. I think they had Rock Creek, and the story that I was told as far as the park being established is because one of my uncles and several of his friends in the community went to Rock Creek and they wouldn't let them in. So when the community found out about it, my great-grandfather went and told the city, he'll take this land, build my community a park, so we won't have to go through that. Because back then racism was still here, but it was much heavier back then. You really couldn't go anywhere.
What was the name of the first park built for blacks in Albemarle?
Venturing east on Wall Street, passing the old stomping grounds of Kingville High School, cross Highway 2427, and then veer left at the John Deere. There you stumble across the once upon a time Kingville Park, later renamed South Albemarle Park after integration, and then Roosevelt Ingram Park. But now, alas, it's just a deserted lot, rife with high stakes and memories.
Who are Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington, and what's their connection to black education in Stanly County?
Two legendary figures, Julius Rosenwald and Booker T. Washington, funded the Rosenwald Fund. And what was their mission, you ask? To help black schools in the South during the 1920s. These heroes made a massive impact on 6 schools in Stanly County: New London, Cottonville, Kingville, Oakboro, Norwood, and even Porter School, though it's not pictured. According to the current Stanly County Museum's website, beginning in 1921, Albemarle's African American youth attended Kingville School. According to the Stanly County Museum's website, New London School is the only Rosenwald building still standing in Stanly County. This is not true, at least at the time of this presentation. The historic old schoolhouse at 1073 Lundy Street remains standing, just as the former New London Rosenwald School, now known as Parkers Grove Baptist Church, still stands at 44311 Danville Road in New London, North Carolina. This Stanley News Herald article from 1922 reports on approved funds for the new Kingville School and features a picture of the home economics class of black girls with their principal R.S. Graves. Further to this, an article was published in the Stanley News Herald later in the same year. The article, dated December 1922, details the use of Julius Rosenwald funds for the construction of a new building. It also highlights how the building was completed a year prior, after the principal put in long and earnest work.
Who were some of the principals and advocates of the old schoolhouse in its beginnings?
In 1922, when it was called the Kingville Colored School, you had Professor and Principal R.S. Graves. In 1926, when it was called the Stanly County Training School, you had Principal E.H. Miller. In 1927, you had Principal J.M. Williams. 1927 through 1928, William Henry Wall was elected president of the Parent Teachers Association.
What was taught to black students at the old schoolhouse between 1920 to 1937?
Highlighting the article from 1922, when Professor R.S. Graves was the principal, it was mentioned that the old schoolhouse on Lundy Street, formerly known as the Kingville Colored School, was renamed the Stanly County Training School. Notice the importance of home economics and agriculture in black education, although the sum of $500 will be available annually so long as high school subjects are taught. It's also significant to note in the directory of the North Carolina school officials that are following that the training school was not classified as a high school until Horace C. Gore took charge as principal of the new Kingville High School built on Wall Street in 1937.
Who was Horace C. Gore?
1931 to 1936, Principal H.C. Gore ran the Stanley County Training School at 1073 Lundeck Street. And when they opened a new school at 621 Wall Street, Principal Gore ran the new Kingville High School from 1937 to 1944.
When was the last graduating class of the Stanley County Training School?
Provided is a copy of Brady Crump Sr.'s last diploma from Stanley County Training School in 1936, signed by H.C. Gore. As per the website of the Stanley County Museum, the one-story brick West Elementary School was built for white students, and the one-story brick Kingville Elementary School was designated for African American students, and they were completed by contracts in 1937 in Albemarle. The Stanley County School Board, per the website, has set aside $43,000 for the construction and furnishing of this Kingville Elementary School.
Would take me to this building up on Lundeck, and it was a big room, and you know, most of the classes would go like from first kindergarten, first, second, third, you know, and there wasn't a high school. I remember that. There was never a high school there.
Why not?
Because it was just a house. It was like a school house, not a school building, but a house.
Okay.
It was just a little, you know, place they called school.
So did a lot of people just drop out after 8th or 9th grade? Is that why they didn't go to high school?
They didn't have a high school.
What do you mean?
That's as far as they went.
So there wasn't a high school to go to?
No.
Because I hear stories about, you know, my grandma saying she just went as far as 8th grade and my grandfather went as far as 9th grade, but I'm thinking they dropped out.
No, it wasn't no high school.
There wasn't
That's
a high
why
school
they built Kingville High School to make it go all the way to the 12th grade. So that's when I came to go to school. I began to go to school. When my sisters went all the way to the school, you know, how far ever they went up from first to the 8th or 9th grade, then they finished in the brick building.
So it's not that they dropped out.
Mm-mm.
They didn't have nowhere to drop into.
We all had to finish high school. My dad wouldn't hear it.
But your dad didn't have an opportunity because there wasn't a high school for him to go to?
Mm-mm.
Got you. Okay. Now that makes sense. It's not that they dropped out. They didn't have a high school to go to.
No high school.
And Kingville High was the first high school for blacks in Albemarle, correct?
That's it.
Okay. Gotcha. Now that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. That's why they call it Kingville High.
They
could have said Kingville School.
You're right.
But they said Kingville High.
According to the Stanley County Museum's website, the new Kingville Elementary School that stands, well, actually now stood, at what is now 621 Wall Street in Albemarle, replaced the Frank Rosenwald School that occupied the site. This is also not true. The Kingville Rosenwald School stood at 1073 Lundeck Street, wasn't replaced, and still stands at 1073 Lundeck Street in Albemarle, North Carolina. Well, at least at the time of this presentation.
Who were the principals at the new Kingville High School at 621 Wall St. from 1937 to 1967?
After Gore, E. Waddell was principal of Kingville High School until 1963, and B.K. Williams was principal until its closing in 1968.
A little bit about you mentioned E. Waddell. Who that was, and what was he to you?
Mr. Waddell was the principal at Kingville, and he knew my circumstances as far as walking to school and all. So he made sure that, so I wouldn't have to walk. He said, I'm going to see that you get your bus license so you have a way to come, to and from school without walking with it. And I appreciate him for that. And Mr. Mitchell was the coach, and I didn't get to go to the away games and all. So he said, I'm gonna see that you can drive the activity bus so you get to go to all the games, and that you get to go, because he knew my circumstances wouldn't that would go. And I appreciate the teachers at the school and the people that worked in the cafeteria that made sure that I got a meal every day by me working in the meal and cleaning the trays and things. And I owe it all to them for making sure that the way that I didn't have a way, that I had a way to do the things that the other kids could do.
That was valedictorian of Kingville?
Of Kingville High School,
Okay,
right.
cool.
A young lady in my class named Lula Mellon Smith. They lived right behind me. We were challenging each other. She was a good student, and I knew I had to work extra hard to get that challenge. And see, the valedictorian, I understand, is chosen by the grades and the activities that you participate in. Although we might have been close together with classroom activities, but my extra activities might have had something to do with that also. Because every activity that they had at the school, I participated in when I had time. As I mentioned earlier, I was in the band, I played football, basketball, baseball, I was in the dramatics, I was in the school choir. Plus, I kept my work. I never came to school without having my work done. So you can see it took not just doing schoolwork, but other activities that you had to participate in for the teachers to select a person to be valedictorian. We had many students in the class that was challenging. And plus, after doing the schoolwork and everything, I also had a little job that I had to do. I don't know if I mentioned, I had 2 paper routes. And I had to do work at home. One paper route was every morning. And the other paper route was 2 days a week. But with all that work I did and the jobs I had, I still was able to keep up my schoolwork. And that showed the instructors and my parents and me that I had to work hard to accomplish all those things. And so when the instructors voted on who would be whatever, valedictorian, they had to take all of those things into consideration. Your grades, your activities at school, in order to be salutatorian of a class. And I thank them for voting on me at that particular time because I had some challenges. Not only him, I also had the principal's brother in my class that was pushing pretty hard, but I think he still live in Albemarle, Douglas Waddell. But maybe the things that I did at that particular time had a little slight edge on them.
What was the significance of the Brown versus Board of Education case in
The
1954?
Brown versus Board of Education case in 1954 was a historical legal milestone that declared segregation in schools as unconstitutional. The ruling violated the 14th Amendment, which ensured that everyone had equal rights to education. The case was triggered by the disparity in resources between black and white schools, as well as the long distances that black students had to travel to attend school in certain locations. The Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas was advocating for a separate but equal system, which aimed to segregate students based on race. The government's response was to initiate the integration of schools across the United States.
Why did the Stanley County school system continue to build onto the Kingville school campus despite federal integration laws?
Although federal integration laws were in full effect, the County Board of Education continued to build onto the Kingville School campus. As a matter of fact, in 1954, contractors finished a gymnasium and a second classroom building on the Kingville campus. After the U.S. Supreme Court mandated desegregation in 1954, it took more than a decade for most North Carolina municipalities to integrate. In response to a selective integration bill, African American students were allowed to apply for admission to white schools in Charlotte, Greensboro, and Winston-Salem in the summer of 1957. According to the Stanley County Museum's website, in 1965, the Albemarle school system implemented integration measures after a school consolidation campaign that began in 1961. This involved converting 10 existing high schools to elementary schools and building 3 new high school campuses. Although the federal integration mandate was issued a decade before 1964, an auditorium was still added to the Kingville Schools campus. According to the Stanley County Museum's website, the school, originally known as Kingville High School, was still referred to as Kingville Elementary, and the county had already started calling the area South Albemarle by 1964. Although the school remained Kingville High School until it was shut down in 1967, there was never a South Albemarle High School or Kingville Elementary.
Who were some of the first black students to volunteer for integration into the Stanley County school system in
In
1965?
1965, a group of courageous students broke the racial barriers that existed within North Stanley High School and Albemarle High School. Christine Brown and Pamela Greer were the first black students to integrate North Stanley High School, while Charlie McClendon, Brenda Pemberton, Broadus Blanding, Woody Brigham, Patsy Simon, Terry Townsend, Bobby Rory, David Moses, Priscilla Leak, Brenda Lilly, Charlie Clark, and Robert Parks were the fearless 12 that integrated Albemarle High School.
I could only assume it could be tough during that time, but what was one of the things or a few things you think made you stick it out and graduate from Albemarle Senior High when during integration at that time?
Yeah, I think that what made me really stay was the teacher that I had there, Miss Stasovich, and I was in her class and I flunked it. And I told her that I wanted to get in the class with all the other black people that were there right in my class. And she told me what had happened was the way that they operated at the school. She said when they were teaching everything on the English and all of that level, they were teaching on a college level. You see what I'm saying? When in retrospect, here at Kingville High School, they were teaching everything in the 9th grade, they were teaching 9th grade. Everything 10th grade, they were teaching 10th grade. You see what I'm saying? So by the time I'm going up there, I'm learning everything now in the 11th grade. You know what I'm saying? But they're teaching on the college level. You see where I'm coming from? And she sat me down and she told me that. And that was one of the main reasons that I stayed up there, because I seen the improvement going in. I learned what they were doing.
So you had to catch up then? You had to play catch up?
Of course I did.
Okay.
Let me tell you something. Let me show you some of the most embarrassing things that in my English class, they diagrammed the whole sentence with every word in there, but they didn't do that here. They teach you the subject, the verb, predicate, and that was about it. You see what I'm saying? But then it went a little further with the rest of them up there, and that's what they were teaching. And once I got into that, I learned a little more. But I'll be honest, I didn't graduate from up there with an A. I didn't even graduate with a B, but I graduated with a C. I graduated in her class, and I passed with the C+.
Okay. I wasn't there. I just let me hear your thoughts on it, John.
All right. As he said, I'm John Louders. Most people that went to school with me will know me as Johnny Louder. And I grew up here in Albemarle and attended junior high, Central Junior High and Senior High, and graduated. But I had the privilege of meeting these young students as they came in. And I would be lying if I didn't say I was a little hesitant about the first day because of all the tension across the United States. And that was, I feel, probably brought on by more the news media than anything else. But enough of that, but back to the story. I had a real good relationship with all the students that attended. I served in the band together, we played sports together, and never had any problem whatsoever. And but I have been made aware of some of the facts that not all of them graduated from Albemarle. Some of them chose to go back to their home school, Kingville, which was perfectly all right. But and I never realized that they suffered academically. Those of you that read, that hear this and that know me, know I struggled academically. That's the reason I was supposed to graduate in '66, but I graduated in '67 because I failed the 7th grade. But I counted a blessing that I did because my life started changing there. But the biggest reason I think I got along with most all the students, whether they were black or white.
What did the local newspaper call the last graduating class of Kingville High School in 1967?
This is the last graduating class of Kingville High School. Although you'll notice in the local newspaper, they refer to as South Albemarle High graduates.
What did the Kingville Panthers basketball district champion sports jacket say in 1967? What did the last graduating class of Kingville High School's diploma say in 1967? What happened to Kingville after
In one
1967?
word, annexation. Annexation refers to the act of taking control of a land or country and integrating it into a larger territory, typically through forceful means. For instance, the United States annexed regions of Texas and New Mexico, which were originally part of Mexico, kind of like the city of Albemarle, annexed Kingville.
King donated this land, and they called it King's Field.
King's Field, not
Field,
Kingsville.
Not Kingville. But later
Why
on,
did it say field?
because that's all it was. Then people started building the houses, and that made it like a village, and they called it Kingville, Villageville, from my understanding.
Right, and it was after the guy named Dr. King, right? He was a white doctor, right?
He was.
Ogden King.
And he donated that land. And then later on, after the old schoolhouse, they built a school called Kingville High School. And when I left here and went up north and come back, there was no more Kingville, there was South Albemarle.
What happened to Kingville High School in
A section of
2000?
the former Kingville campus, which ceased operations in 1969, has been repurposed at the E.E. Waddell Community Center. This space comprises the gymnasium and the second classroom building, which was constructed in 1954. As per a June 8, 2000 article in the Stanley News and Press, Albemarle city officials authorized the burning down of Kingville School due to various safety hazards, while a school alumni group wished for a new school to be constructed in its place. Officials considered turning the area into a community park. Today, it's nothing more than an empty parking lot with a playground. The Kingville alumni had worked with the city for years trying to salvage Kingville School, but as one alumni said, there was never enough money available to save it.
What can we do as a community to preserve the history of Kingville and the old schoolhouse? How do we create and maintain a sustainable, economically mobile community with ongoing health, STEM, arts, and trade school programs?
Stanley Avengers Incorporated. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization founded in November of 2021.
Dedicated to the first black cheerleader at Albemarle High School,
Let's get back to our future. To heal those wounds that are no longer confusing us or abusing us. Let's just get back used to us being united we stand, because divided we'll fall for almost anything. Let's take this back to when there were villages with kings who respected our queens, who were less concerned with the price of wedding rings and more concerned with the virgin joys that self-preservation can bring before the ring. Let's get back to our future. Let's get back to the knowledge of self-worth. Let's get back to understanding a real man's worth wouldn't be determined by if his check would be on the first. Let's get back to understanding of what being a woman and a real man is. Let's understand this. If time is money, and money is time, we might not have to worry about divorces, forced to get the court system, the child support system, a dime if we just spend more time. Let's just sit back, go way back to a moment in time. Let's close our eyes, open up our minds, and let's just rewind to a moment in time when it wasn't just us fighting for just us. We were fighting for equal opportunities for all men and women. Before drugs, sex, and violence came into our communities and infiltrated us, before early in the morning we would see our reflection on the corners, wondering without warning, wondering why they just busting us. Let's get back to our future. Let's get back to the head of the dinner table. And if we're able, let's try to understand the why behind how Cain was even capable of killing Abel.
Well, that's the next mystery we need to uncover then, because this is new to me. I just figured out the mystery of the old schoolhouse on Lundex and Washington Lane. But if you're telling me there was 2 schools before Kingville, is that what you're telling me?
Yes, sir. I'm telling you that right now.